Live from our hurricane headquarters with real-time analysis from some of the nation's top meteorologists, this is Tracking the Tropics, powered by Bose Electric.
I'm meteorologist Rebecca Berry checking in on Tracking the Tropics from the WFLA Stream Center. And unfortunately, we do have something to track in the tropics. And just like that, we went from a below average hurricane season with only having one named storm, and then Berry popped up, very short-lived, now 2 named storms. I am not alone. I am joined by fellow meteorologist Juliana and Mejia. Good morning, Juliana, or good afternoon, I guess. It's almost nighttime for you because you're a morning meteorologist.
Exactly, yes. End of my day, for sure.
And we're also joined by our guest, our featured meteorologist, chief meteorologist from our Charleston station, Rob Fowler. Hey, Rob.
Hi, guys. Thanks for this invite. I always love talking about the tropics, and especially with you guys, and love tracking the tropics each and every year.
We love checking in with Rob, and we're going to hear more from him in just a minute. And I just wanted to point out to our audience, this is an interactive program, and it's better when you guys weigh in. And the way that you guys weigh in so that we can see your comments is to use one of the featured hashtags. You can see them below each of our pictures. The hashtags are hashtag Hey Rebecca, hashtag Hey Juliana, and hashtag Hey Rob. If you use any of those, we'll be able to see your comment, we'll be able to pull it on screen, and we'll be able to talk about what you guys want to talk about, answer the questions that you guys have. But for right now, I know everyone's focus has been on the yellow blob. So I'm going to send it to Juliana to take it away. Tell us what you know.
Exactly. The blob, as we so professionally call it, where this has now a 30% chance of tropical development. So this came out, I think, the top of the 8 o'clock hour from the National Hurricane Center, just that very slight update and upgrade. We're still, though, you see the 2-day outlook, 0%. They're looking to the end of this week, if anything wants to try to organize. And yes, this encompasses the Northeast Gulf over Florida, as well as portions of the Atlantic. So that all kind of encompasses where this potential area of low pressure may try to reside. It may try to pop up. So here's a look at that moisture forecast, where what we're tracking in the bigger setup is a frontal boundary, a cold front sliding across the southeast, going to make its way towards our area, stalling out over Florida, and with that, it could spin off an area of low pressure. Now, the question at this point is as to whether how well this organizes, whether or not we get in a closed area of circulation, whether this even truly has tropical characteristics is still kind of in question at the moment, and that's why we're just floating at that very low end chance of tropical development. This could be subtropical, or potentially not really even properly organized at all. So the time will tell. Time will tell, and we'll be looking to the end of this week. But as of right now, models are trying to develop this just ever so slightly. Those that do keep it rather weak, and so we're really looking at Thursday through the weekend for likely the greatest impacts out of whatever the system may be. What essentially we're communicating it as of now is as a rainmaker, which is not unusual. We've seen these, and especially see these early on in the season. Rainfall forecast right now, kind of a wide swath, especially over Florida, between about 2 to 5 inches. Although some areas, especially along the Gulf Coast, could see upwards of 6, even 7 inches. And so that is where then the flood risk comes in. And we're looking at an elevated risk of flooding, especially along the Gulf Coast and central and northern parts of Florida towards about Thursday. So, everybody's going to been keeping a close eye on this forecast because of the 4th of July. Yes, we are still locally keeping the rain chances very high heading into Friday, but Thursday is looking like the main impact day. So now, if this were to take a name, the next name on the list is Chantal. And again, that's still a big if. So tropical development, actually wanted to look at June 1st to compare the two, because today is day 1 of July. This is essentially kind of lining up with that June and July typical areas of tropical development for this part of the season. The Northeast Gulf for June, and then heading into July, we're still monitoring northern parts of the Gulf. And then exactly where that yellow blob extends over into is the far western Atlantic, pretty much right up the eastern seaboard of the United States. And so it wouldn't be shocking to see this potentially little system or a wannabe system take essentially this path in a way, or exist and organize in these spots, somewhere in the far northeast Gulf, somewhere here over Florida, or riding up the eastern seaboard. So that's also why, portions of the Carolinas are keeping a close eye on those forecasts as well. Now, when in terms of checking in with where we're at so far, again, given that where you see the areas of development, we are all eyes right now on the Gulf. And you see exactly why that is, because of the ocean heat content, the Gulf warming up a little bit better, and it tends to, because the Atlantic is just so vast and so deep, takes its time, and it takes some time to heat that up. So that's why you can see certainly seeing enough heat content and the warm sea surface temperatures to support potential development. Also here, what then another factor is, yes, we've been tracking hazy conditions, and we've noticed kind of the milky look to our skies locally and across much of Florida today, and then into tomorrow. That starts to dissipate. That starts to ease up quite a bit, and then it all thins out. And especially heading into Thursday and Friday, that's when this kind of window of opportunity opens up, one that moisture is all going to come rushing in, and we've got tropical moisture one way or another in the forecast, but then it also kind of just opens up this slim opportunity for maybe something to, it's not so much of a hostile environment per se with the lack of dust. Then, across the rest of the Atlantic basin, fortunately, keeping things quiet in that regard, thanks to more plumes of Sahara dust sliding across the Atlantic basin. So here's another look at that cold front setup, where regardless of whether or not this develops, the state of Florida, central and especially northern parts of Florida, will be looking at widespread rain, torrential downpours, that very tropical downpours, and likely some good strong storms in the mix as well towards the end of this week. And now I wanted to bring in Rob at this point to see where you might want to chime in and what your thoughts are on all of this.
Yeah, it's interesting because, it's a double-edged sword, because we've got the holiday week and we really do need some rain here. We just came off a pretty decent drought. The drought is over in South Carolina, but it was pretty substantial for quite a while. So we definitely do need the rain. And this setup is certainly something where we could get some significant rainfall. What we're looking at is mainly tomorrow, Wednesday, and then kind of tapering off a little bit on Thursday and into the 4th of July, mainly because we think as that low develops, if it does develop, and that's a big if right now, that it should be tracking more northeast away from our coast. But right now we are getting some showers and thunderstorms along our coast, especially the beaches of South Carolina as we speak, as we're recording this. And again, tomorrow looks like it probably will be the soggiest of days for us, and then we'll get some improvement. Kind of interesting, I was looking back at last year. Last year, we were tracking Major Hurricane Beryl. So I think I'll take this over Beryl this early in the season, no doubt about it. But again, we do need some rain here in South Carolina, especially along the coast of South Carolina. So even though it's a holiday week and weekend, we'll take whatever we can get when we can get it, certainly this time of the year.
Absolutely. And, locally as well here in Florida, we're still combating drought and working our way past the drought. Now, of course, with at least in our area, and these kinds of totals that we can see, so that's the GFS, and then we switch that over to the Euro. Now they're kind of coming into some better agreement and look fairly similar. Of course, there's areas that need the rain more than others, and then there's the point where you get just too much rain a little too quickly, and that's kind of what this is at least shaping up locally. Going to be quite a few inches there. But yes, you can kind of get the idea of where this rainmaker area of low pressure will exist just by looking at this. So this is looking out at rainfall over the next 7 days and how much rain could fall over that entire 7-day period, and showing exactly the area that the National Hurricane Center is highlighting: Eastern Gulf over Florida, and hopefully where you see quite a bit of rain offshore in the Atlantic. It's not impossible to say that also could inch its way along the eastern seaboard and right along the coast of the Carolinas as well, with some of those higher totals. But then here's the summary from the Weather Prediction Center as well. We'll load this in just to show you also big picture where they have, and it'll pop up in a second, that color contour tends to take a moment. There we go, where you can also visually see the swath of quite a bit of rainfall. So it's good to know, though, that at least it is much needed rain for areas farther north of Florida.
I feel like Charleston is kind of like South Tampa in some regards, that it floods pretty easily. So it's probably good that you guys aren't in the reds and oranges there.
Yeah, and we've got a full moon coming up. So our tidal situation is dictated by the moons. And if we have a full or a new moon, typically the tides are going to be higher. And if you add rain on top of that, that does spell some problems for us. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that real deep moisture stays offshore. But we know this time of the year, you've got to deal with scattered showers and thunderstorms. But I guess in a positive, the half full as opposed to half empty, with the clouds and the rain, our temperature, especially tomorrow, may be held down in the 80s. And we've got 17, I think now 18 straight days in the 90s. And I know that's very typical for Florida, but maybe not as typical for us all the time here.
And I know entering this hurricane season, it's probably weighing heavy on your mind because it's been a while since the Charleston area has seen a major storm.
Yeah, Rebecca, that's probably one of the biggest battles that we have. Our community, like many communities, especially in some of the warmer climates, growing at a crazy rate, percentage growth each and every year, and we don't have anywhere to put people. But the bottom line is when you go back to 1989, that was the last major hurricane that made landfall along our coast. Yes, we've had other hurricanes, but not a Hurricane Hugo-like storm. So we're a little bit worried that we've got more people in harm's way, more people coming from different places in the country that don't deal with hurricanes. And then the complacency where those who were here said, well, I weathered Hugo and I've been around a long time. I can weather the next one. But we know that each and every storm has its own identity. It doesn't matter what happened in 1989. Doesn't matter what happened last year. Every year is a new year. We wipe the blackboard clean. We start fresh. And if even a tropical depression, if it's sat on top of us, producing a lot of rain at a certain moon phase, that's going to spell some problems for us. So that's one of our big concerns, complacency, as well as the fact that a lot of people did not go through the worst of Hurricane Hugo. There was only a small sliver of our coast that went through the worst, the Category 4 conditions. Most of the Charleston area went through a Category 2. So even though we went through a Category 4, some of us, it wasn't everybody, and certainly not our main population centers.
A lot of Floridians feel like that also. They say, oh, well, I lived through Hurricane Charlie. The wind field for Hurricane Charlie was tiny. And so you might have gotten those outer rain bands, but you didn't actually experience a major storm. So while the Tampa area is not feeling very complacent after last year, we still deal with that thought process that, no, I survived that storm. I should be fine.
Yeah, I was born in New Orleans, and my grandmother would not leave for anything. So in 1965, I went through Hurricane Betsy as a 5-year-old child, and I stayed at my grandparents' house, and they were not leaving. They were not taking us. We were going to hunker down, and that's exactly what we did. So there's that mindset from some of the folks who've been around for a while that said, hey, I've weathered all these storms, but the next storm could be different. Depends on when it comes in and how long it stays.
And infrastructure has changed vastly. We have buildings in so many places there weren't buildings before, and all that water has to go somewhere. There's just so many different complex factors to each and every storm, and people have to make the best decisions that they can. But in general, we always emphasize if you're ordered to evacuate, please evacuate. There's a very good reason for that.
And I appreciate you guys doing this because what this does is it gets information out. It informs people, maybe those who have never been through this before. I get a lot of people coming up to me saying, hey, I came from Ohio. I know tornadoes. I don't know hurricanes. So they are leaning on us and relying on us to be that informational source, which brings up another issue that we are still, all of us are dealing with, and that's social media, which I personally feel is the best thing ever invented, but it's also the worst thing ever invented. So I would rely on a source that you trust and you've seen in action, and try not to share things that may not be true, because that gets shared and then we've got to battle the misinformation and get that kind of cleaned up before we can get the real good information out.
And all of the anxiety created by people sharing the GFS 10 days out, that we call them GFS-icanes. We just don't want to add undue stress to people's lives. And so that's why we only share information that is trusted, that is good, that is reliable. And that's why it's so important to rely on your local meteorologist rather than a faceless Facebook page or anything like that, because social media is wild.
We've all been there where, someone comes up and asks us what's going on, and someone posts something 10 days out, and we all know it's going to change. And by the end of that 10 days, there may not even be a hurricane when there was one 10 days ago.
Exactly. And so we're talking today about a system that may or may not form. We're being very transparent, and we're also being very transparent that it's going to rain and be really rainy for the 4th of July weekend, whether this forms or whether it doesn't. In fact, if it does end up forming, there's a chance it could dry out our forecast a little faster. It may draw in some of that moisture and make our rain chances more concise instead of just so widespread and so spread out through several days as well.
Yeah, and these are very important because the ones that form close to us, land, you don't have as much time to prepare. So you've got to be ready. You've got to have all your cards on the table. If this does develop, what am I going to do? Because the lead time is not going to be there, as opposed to one that's, several days out in the Atlantic Ocean, several days away, that we have time to watch it and analyze it and inform people about what may happen.
And I do want to remind our audience watching, this is interactive. You can ask questions, but you do have to use the hashtags that are just below our pictures. It's hashtag Hey Rebecca, hashtag Hey Juliana, or hashtag Hey Rob. And with that, let's go ahead and kick off our Q&A section. And so use those hashtags, ask those questions, make those comments so that we can interact with you guys. And I love this one. They just went with hashtag Hey Meteorologist. Is it possible the hurricane season might be a bust? Man, oh man, we would love that, wouldn't we, guys?
Wow. I would love to go through all the names and all of them stay out in the ocean, but people have to realize this is early in the season. In fact, Dr. William Gray from Colorado State, the late wonderful Dr. William Gray, who did a wonderful job and continues in the role of Dr. Phil Klotzbach. He always rang a bell on August 20th because in his mind, that's when the hurricane season started, because 2/3 of all activity happened between August 20th and October 10th. So no, this is not a bust. We hope it's a bust. I even though the numbers are there, I would much rather have no numbers and call it a bust as opposed to have to deal with what we have to deal with. And you can see on that chart that the peak month is September, peak day is September 10th. We're still climbing the mountain. We haven't even gotten anywhere close to the top of the mountain yet.
Exactly. And I, just like my fellow meteorologists, are obsessed with accuracy. I'm waking up early in the morning to make sure my forecast verified that rain is moving in on shore. Mm-hmm. But I would love to be wrong about hurricane season. I would love, 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 love it.
Well, my wife is my kind of sounding board. We hear rain on the roof, and she says, "Did you say it was going to rain this morning?" So she's always checking to make sure the forecast was right or wrong in some cases.
Thanks for watching, sweetie.
Yes, yes.
All right, we have another question. This one's fun. This comes from Steve. It's from our Facebook page. Hashtag Hey Rebecca, knock on wood. I've never experienced hurricane damage in my double wide mobile home in Largo in 23 years. That's 2 different mobile homes in one city. I'm 4 miles from the Gulf as the crow flies. Here's to another good year of no damage. Ooh, we're knocking on wood for you there, Steve, because that is only 4 miles from the Gulf is wild. But the good news is some people do go through storms and don't get major damage. I only had fence panels down with Milton. And so it's not always worst case scenario. And that's one thing that we do talk about here on Tracking the Tropics a lot, especially on our Hurricane Hacks episode, is most people experience an extended power outage and a messy yard and maybe some fence panels down, but near the eye and the areas that actually experience those major hurricane conditions, that's where you see the worst of the damage. And that's, of course, where we send the crews and we show you on television. But a lot of us just really, as Floridians, have wild, crazy things we do when we're out of power for 3 and 4 days. And so we talk about people freeze coffee in advance, different ways to charge your phones. Most people have to worry about an extended power outage. So hopefully that is only the case this season as well.
Hey, I'm Team Steve. Steve, I hope it's a very quiet season.
Exactly. We love quiet seasons. We would love that. And I know, first of all, we're not talking politics ever because we don't want to, but I know that you've seen some headlines lately and you may have some questions about some satellite data that is threatened for being turned off. And Rob and I were talking about it before the show started. Hopefully it's not going to happen. Hopefully we'll still have access to that data. Do you want to explain a little bit further about how we use that?
Yeah, absolutely. So at least there's been an extension till the end of July, but the Department of Defense has satellites. Different countries have satellites. We have satellites, and the satellite technology is very important. I almost say it's like we need all the tools in the toolbox to make an accurate forecast. All I have to do, Rebecca and Juliana, is go back to 1960, because that's when we launched our first satellite, Tyros 1. I think it lasted like for 78 days. That was it. But it was the first time we were actually looking down on the Earth and seeing these storms form. So you can only imagine not having this data that we so desperately need to make an accurate forecast by looking at these storms that are now out in the middle of the ocean. All you have to do is go back to Galveston, 1900. That's probably our worst natural disaster ever in our country's history. Maybe as many as 12,000 people perished. We just don't know. But they didn't have satellites back then. They didn't have the data that we have now. So we can't take 2 or 3 steps back by cutting off all information that we use. So the Department of Defense sharing some of this data with the National Hurricane Center in terms of satellite technology And that's part of the beauty of it, is all the sharing that's been taking place across every single hurricane season, really every day of the year as we're tracking any kind of a storm, not just hurricanes. So let's hope that obviously folks kind of get together, talk about it. Obviously, your viewers, your listeners have a say in this as well. If they feel compelled to contact their congressmen, their senators, and say, "Hey, we need this data. Let's keep rolling along like we've been rolling along for years." And even though there's been some question about how the data is transmitted and could there be a cybersecurity issue, we've got to make sure that we rectify that in some form or fashion. So again, we need this data. We've come so far, and the forecasts have gotten so much better that we can't take a step backwards.
And man, the next comment is an illustration of how good we wish the data was. This one's hashtag Hey Rob, are we going to get any hurricane force winds?
Oh gosh, that's a good question, Sal. Probably too early to make a definite forecast in anything, but if you're talking about the storm that's offshore that could develop, most likely not. I think it'll be tracking away from us. It's going to be a very weak storm. Maybe it gets a name, but the chances of that, as Juliana mentioned, is only 30%. So that's pretty low over the next 7 days. But regardless, we've got to take each threat seriously. That these things, I've seen things ramp up right off the coast, and before you know it, it's on your doorstep. So you got to be really careful, and you got to keep your eyes wide open.
All right, we're going to send the next question over to Juliana. This is Nate asking, is there anything happening out in the Atlantic? Is there any tropical waves going on out there? So we already talked about that one system that we're watching, but out in the Atlantic, we start watching those waves roll off the coast of Africa.
Yes. Yeah. Now, yes, there will always kind of be the wave train. I don't have that here updated to show you, but the Saharan dust is really all that we're seeing roll around in the Atlantic. So yes, there are tropical waves out there. And luckily, we're just so early in the season. The Atlantic needs to heat up. There's still Saharan dust that's making things unfavorable for any of those waves to try to do anything. So right now, the answer is yes, but we're mainly seeing dust, if anything, out there.
All right, last call for those comments and questions using one of our hashtags like hashtag Hey Rebecca, hashtag Hey Juliana, or hashtag Hey Rob. And we're going to give the floor to our featured meteorologist, Rob, and your thoughts on the hurricane season moving forward and what you want to communicate.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I think the numbers are going to be there. I think it will be an active or above average season. What we can't predict right now is there going to be a landfall, how many landfalls, and where those landfalls will be. So that's why we've got to prepare each and every year as if you're going to be hit and impacted by a storm. And I think all of us in the meteorology field are also kind of shifting more towards away from the categories and what the impacts will be, because it doesn't have to be a Category 1 hurricane. It could be a tropical storm, tropical depression can do as much damage in terms of rainfall and flooding, especially here along the coast of South Carolina. So I think we're learning a lot every single day. I've been doing this for over 43 years. I've been in Charleston coming up on 38 years. So I've seen a lot of hurricane seasons come and go, and each and every year we learn something new about that particular season, and then we apply it to the next season. Great example, what happened last year with Hurricane Helene. I mean, Helene broke a lot of the rules. Most of us feel like hurricanes are coastal storms, and this one did so much damage inland, and they're still picking up the pieces months and months later. So I think, again, we're all learning. Our viewers are learning, we're learning, and hopefully we can inform and educate. But at this time, I do believe it's going to be a busy season. It looks that way. Question is, who gets it, and if anybody gets it at all.
All right. And our comments have wrapped up. Thank you so much. And so I did want to make a programming note. Originally, we were planning on talking about the Google AI hurricane model that debuted this season for us, but we pushed that to next week because the National Hurricane Center can join us as our expert guest to help explain further how that might be changing forecasting moving forward. So hopefully you'll join us next week on Tracking the Tropics. For Juliana, for Rob, and for myself, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, if anything pops up, we will hop on the stream and let you know. Thanks, guys.
Find Tracking the Tropics on these platforms. And for storm updates, the latest models, and helpful resources, visit trackingthetropics.tv.